So we are finally going to go over the much awaited build video that people have been asking me for many streams now. There were just a lot of things I had to iron out, and I kept changing my build, but I finally found something that I feel super confident in, and I think is a really good end game build. It is important to note that this is more of like an end game build because it requires a lot of things for this to work. This is not a good leveling build. It's just not going to work. So this all started, I was chilling with chat, and I was, I do just all of my own build making on stream, and we just kind of talk about it. And I said, what exactly is lucky hit chance? Being new to Diablo, I'm like, what does lucky hit chance mean? And we were reading it, and chat was trying to fill me in, and basically it's like crit, but instead of like a higher number, like a critical damage number, it's the idea that something will proc some sort of effect that is granted in your skill tree or in your armor. This is where it all started. So what we did is we went into the abilities tree, we went into keyword, and we typed in lucky hit, and we looked through, and we found multiple things that proc lucky hit. Lucky hit, critical strikes have up to a 5% chance to reset the cooldown of one of your defensive skills. Lucky hit chances increased. Lucky hit, frost skills have up to a 9% chance to instantly freeze. Lucky hit, cold damage against vulnerable enemies has up to a 20% chance to generate mana. And the king of them all, avalanche, lucky hit. Your frost skills have up to a 10% chance to make your next cast of ice shards, which is my primary DPS core skill, to consume no mana and to deal 40% increased damage. Chances doubled against vulnerable enemies. So this immediately had my brain turning, and we got crazy, because the biggest issue is, how do you generate a lot of damage output, consistent damage with a Sorc, if mana is always a problem? And all of these things were just speaking to me like, this is how you get your mana back. So this started the train towards lucky hit. We decided to start crafting a build based around stacking as much lucky hit percentage as possible. So we're going to start with the skill tree, and we're going to work our way down. Sorry, this video might be a little bit long, but so the first thing we do is we spec 2 points skills into Firebolt. The reason we're doing that is for the enchantment. We don't use a basic skill, which is why this wouldn't work for leveling. Prior to leveling, I recommend doing Frostbolt and then specking into Glinting Frostbolt so you can generate some mana that way. After you get, up around level 50, 60, you can just drop that entirely. This is our main DPS. Our main DPS is Ice Shards. Ice Shards are really good, and it's definitely the best option for frost and cold damage. This is like everything is supplementing Ice Shards, and we decided to go into destructive Ice Shards. Now, I think this is really good earlier on, but you pretty much need the vulnerability on destructive Ice Shards for my build to work properly. But you may see some people use this. So you hit it with enhanced Ice Shards and destructive Ice Shards. Okay, we're gonna snag 1 point in devastation so that we can get triple elemental dominance. The reason being, we're trying to keep our mana bar as high as possible all the time, and most of the time during bosses and big chunky encounters with a lot of elites, the mana bar is just not going to move. And I'm going to show this in gameplay. We're going to have various clips at the end of the overview. But this gives us a 9% just flat increase to almost all of our Ice Shard shots. Moving down to our defensive skills, we're just putting 1 point into Flame Shield, because we just need Flame Shield. We're putting 1 point into Enhance so that we can put 1 point into Shimmering Flame Shield. And this Flame Shield is used for multiple different reasons. It's used kind of as like a oh shit button, like things just got really crazy. It's used to keep yourself immune because it does have immunity. It also, immunity will have unstoppable built into it, so it can get rid of your crowd control effects. It can allow you to reposition yourself around behind enemies. It can allow you to activate it and engage an encounter. There's so many different uses for it, and it's really cool. Plus, it has a really short cooldown. 12 seconds for immunity is ridiculous. All right, we put 1 point into teleport. We only need 1. The reason you're seeing higher numbers is because my armor is adding to it. And then we want this shimmering teleport for 30% DR for 3 seconds. I think this is huge. I use teleport a lot because teleport has built-in unstoppable. Once again, unstoppable alleviates you of any sort of crowd control effects that are applied to you. And I think personally, with every single build and every single class in this game, I think it's essential to have a teleporting skill on your hotbar, because it can save your ass in so many different ways, and nothing hurts more than being CC'd, and nothing will kill you more than being CC'd and locked down. So this is huge. We're also putting 1 point into ice armor, and you might say, why only 1 point? Well, another thing that's important with this build is the mana generation, but barriers. This entire build is based around 100% uptime of barriers, everything supplementing barriers and keeping barriers in as many different ways as possible, and having them as strong as possible. You know, multiple different sources of barriers. But we only need 1 point because when ice armor is active, 5% of your damage dealt is added to the barrier. So you're able to keep this barrier full and chunky and nice and healthy almost instantly when you pop it, because of how much damage ice shards is doing. So you do not need to put any more than 1 into this. And then we're putting 1 into enhanced armor, and none of these actually really matter. You don't need ice armor's barrier to be any larger because of the reasons I just explained. And enemies that hit you while ice armor is active have a 15% chance to become frozen. Everything's gonna be fucking frozen and CC'd anyway, so it doesn't matter. And then we put 1 point into Frost Nova, because Frost Nova already has a pretty generous cooldown, and putting points into it only decreases the cooldown. We're doing 1 into Enhanced Frost Nova and 1 into Mystical Frost Nova. This is huge because this is going to be our primary source of vulnerability in a quick burst, paired with destructive ice shards. We're doing 1 into Elemental Attunement because you kind of have like a point to play with here. By putting 1 point into this will give us just a chance that at any point we can reset any of our defensive skills with a critical strike. And this is one of our lucky hits as well. So anything that says lucky hit, we want to proc. Glass Cannon is huge, essential. Run this, guaranteed, no matter what. And honestly, any build. The 18% increased damage for the 9% damage taken is totally worth the trade-off. We're putting 3 into Precision Magic for very obvious reasons. Lucky hit chance, maxing it out to 15 in the skill tree. We're doing 1 to align the elements so that we can do 3 into Protection. Once again, this is about having barrier uptime. Using a cooldown grants 30% of your maximum life as a barrier for 2 seconds. This means that even if this barrier runs out and we pop any of our other cooldowns, we just get another barrier back. And then we're using our weapon, or we're using our ice shards to grow that barrier. And then this comes back, and then we pop ice armor again, and then we get another barrier. And you'll see how the barrier just keeps chaining with some other gear that I will go over, particularly these pair of pants that are ridiculous. So as you can see, yes, we are building a character that just has this unstoppable and barrier around him at all times. And it's pretty great. It works really well. We're putting 1 point into Icy Veil because we don't need the barriers to have crazy uptime because of all the different ways that we're getting a barrier. Mainly to put it in a Snap Freeze. This is one that some people might argue with me or disagree with me on. I think Snap Freeze is absolutely huge, at least with the way that I've been playing this. I love it. At any given point, because it's another lucky hit, any enemy that I hit with ice shards will just automatically freeze, and I love it, and it procs all the time, and you will see it. We're doing 3 points into Devouring Blaze through 1 point in Inner Flame so that we can increase our critical strike damage against burning enemies. I will explain why we have some stuff into burning and why every single enemy that we come across is going to be burning, and how burning is so important in the build for not only damage reduction but also dealing damage. You know, we're essentially creating barriers and burning enemies with an enchantment so that we can deal as much damage as possible, because this is very high DPS Sorc. And then this tree here is super important. Max all of these out, absolutely. 15% increased damage to elites, 18% damage to frozen enemies, 9% damage to chilled enemies, 12% damage to vulnerable enemies. Everything is vulnerable anyway. And lucky hit, this is probably the second, you could argue even the first most important thing in the entire build and why we have no mana issues at all. Lucky hit, cold damage against vulnerable enemies has up to a 20% chance to generate 15 mana. So that means that because we're popping Frost Nova to make everything vulnerable, and anything that isn't vulnerable, anytime we shoot them with ice shards, unless you're shooting the fucking clouds, everything is going to be vulnerable all the time. And every single piece of damage against any of these enemies has a 20% chance to generate 15 mana, which is a decent amount. And since our lucky hit is sky high, this is going to proc all the time. It's just going to constantly be procking. Most of the time, it's going to be procking more than the mana is actually draining for ice shards. And ice shards consumes what, 22 mana? I think it's 25 base, and it's ridiculous. And then probably the number one most important thing, like I said, these two are the most important, is avalanche. So let me explain how this works. At any time when you're using ice shards or any of your frost skills, you will sometimes see a little node pop up above your health bar. And that's telling you that your next cast of ice shards is not going to consume mana, and it's going to deal 40% increased damage. And on top of that, since everything is vulnerable all the time for the reasons that I just explained, the chance is doubled that this will occur. And we're stacking lucky hit chance through the roof, so the chance that this occurs all the time. So you're getting like a flat 40% bonus, multiplicative bonus to pretty much all of your ice shard shots. All right, and then we're coming over here to Deep Freeze. So the reason I choose Deep Freeze is because it's an ult, and the ults are really strong, and you may as well use them. And this actually has a pretty decent cooldown. It's not too bad. And the important thing is we don't want anything else that consumes mana. So Deep Freeze is my favorite. It's a huge AoE. It pulses everything. It freezes everything. And it gives you a barrier after it runs out. So it's just another way. I mean, I don't know how many different ways we're getting barriers at this point. I'm losing track. But I love it. Some people disagree with me. Another thing is when Deep Freeze ends, it reduces your other cooldowns by 50%. So you can pop off your other skills, pop Deep Freeze, cut your cooldowns in half, rinse and repeat. This is also another oh shit button. It's a lifesaver. I know Inferno is kind of known to be like meta. I just don't like it. I just don't like it, and I don't think it pairs well with the build, and I don't think it's as cool, and I don't think it's strong, and enemies leave, and it just doesn't work as well. So ultimately your combination of like attacks is going to be teleport in, pop your Frost Nova, activate your ice armor for the barrier, spam your ice shards, then activate your Deep Freeze. Then when your Deep Freeze runs out, maybe activate your Flame Shield to reposition yourself, then pop your Frost Nova again, then teleport out. You just have this constant like ability cooldown spam, and you'll get into the flow of it, and you'll see a little bit of it in the combat that I show. Since we're here, we'll just quickly run over the Paragon. I'm still leveling. This is my first Diablo game. I love build crafting, though I'm no stranger to it. I love analyzing this and coming up with a path. I've never done anything like this before. I've never played an ARPG before. I may get some things wrong in this video, but I love the way that this works. And I'll just briefly explain the path that I chose. So I pretty much pick each board, not necessarily based off of the legendary node, but more so around the blues, because the blues are really, really strong. So we chose Icefall because I think Icefall is actually really good. Killing a frozen enemy grants you 15% of your maximum life as a barrier for 5 seconds. So once again, killing an enemy gives you a barrier. You're just seeing like all these different ways that we're getting barriers, right? And if you look at the blues around this and the yellows, right? Cold damage, chill application, right? Cold damage, cold damage, cold damage. Cold damage is any frost skill. So you're either doing cold damage, your pyromancy skills are doing fire damage, and your shock skills are doing shock damage, right? So we're just buffing our cold damage, grabbing that for the barrier. Damage to chilled enemies. So I want to make this clear here. We were talking about this maybe like 4 or 5 days ago on stream ish. I don't know. I'm losing track of time. A frozen enemy, according to game devs, is also chilled. So that would mean that any damage that is increased to a chilled enemy also counts when you freeze an enemy. Now, we're not doing anything in this build. Nothing in this build is actually chilling. And I think that's important to notice. So when you're looking at perks for this setup, affixes in your armor, you don't want anything that's damaged to like chilled necessarily, although it will work if the enemy is frozen. So does that make any sense? It's kind of hard to explain. So if you're increasing like the effective chill, you're not really doing anything for this build. But if you're increasing the damage to a chilled enemy, that only works when the enemy is frozen. Nothing is actually being chilled until it's frozen. What's chilling would be Frostbolt. Frostbolt chills the enemy slowly which is where increasing effects of chill would help. But in this build, that would be good for leveling. But in this build, only chilled works when an enemy is frozen. But we sneak up here, we grab a glyph, and the first glyph that we decided to grab, and I'm working on this right now because I've been messing around. We're doing damage to burning enemies. And once again, I'll explain where the burning enemies comes from. 20% damage to burning enemies because I've been running nightmares. And ideally, what I liked about this is not only are you increasing your damage to burning enemies, but the additional bonus when I hit all these dex nodes is another 10% increase direct damage to burning enemies. So that means that not burning damage or you know, like the burning damage that the enemies would have, it's whatever like direct impact damage you're hitting those already burning enemies with. Then we're grabbing more damage to chilled enemies. That means frozen in this case. Willpower and int are the two most important stats for this character. We don't really want to put too much waste our points into armor or dex because we're not running a crit chance build, we're running a lucky hit build. But int increases our skill damage and willpower increases our resource generation and our healing, which is the other huge important part. And then we snaked up here and we decided to grab the Burning Instinct board. But we're grabbing the Burning Instinct board not for the legendary, we're grabbing it for the passives, rare nodes and magic nodes because they're really good. And I think at this point, when you get to your third board, you're kind of up in the 70s and 80s of leveling. And I think it's important to have some defense because things are going to start fucking you up. So look at some of these notes. Fantastic, right? 4% damage reduction from enemies that are burning. Everything's burning because of the Firebolt enchantment, right? 2% damage reduction. Damage reduction. DR from elites. Damage reduction from elites. Plus 100 armor. Another 6.5%. I almost have this one unlocked. It's just all about damage reduction from elites on this Burning Instinct. And I'm pretty much just snaking through and grabbing anything that's blue or yellow that gives me int, damage to burning enemies, damage reduction from elites, and damage reduction from burning enemies. For this first node, we did non-physical damage because it made the most sense. All you're doing is non-physical damage, so you may as well slot a glyph that's non-physical. And the additional bonus for this is dealing fire, cold, or lightning damage to an enemy increases all damage you deal to them by 5% for 10 seconds, stacking once per element. So if you're using teleport, which has an AoE shock ability, and you have the Firebolt enchantment, which is burning, and you're doing frost from your attacks, you're actually hitting all three elements, which is going to stack it once per element. And even if you're not using teleport, you're still burning and you're still applying cold damage or frost, which is going to stack that twice. So I like this one a lot. I like Elementalist a lot. I love Flame Feeder. And then third favorite of mine is Territorial because a lot of this build is going to be close range, right up in your face. This is actually not a ranged build, or at least not the way that I play it. And since the theme of this whole board is about damage reduction and survivability, the additional bonus on Territorial, it goes right with it. You gain 10% damage reduction against close enemies. I just think this is a fantastic glyph as well. And we're going to snake through here. We're going to grab this. And then this is the best node on this board. 20% damage to burning enemies, 16% damage to elites, and then the bonus, which I already have unlocked, is another 10% damage to burning enemies. And on top of that, 8% damage to elites, 5% to burning, 8 to elites, 5% to burning, 5% to burning. It's just, this middle is ridiculous, and there's a reason that they put it there. So what we're gonna do is, since this takes 7 nodes to get to this blue, and this takes 6, we're basically coming around here, grabbing these blues, grabbing the glyph, grabbing this, coming down here, grabbing this yellow. Then we're going to snake the 6 to here. And then the quickest way out is right here. And we're going to leave this way. And after this, I haven't really decided what I'm going to do yet. I think I'm probably going to go with Control, which is damage to crowd controlled, chilled, and frozen enemies. And then I'm probably going to go with Exploit, which is damage to vulnerable targets, and dealing damage to a vulnerable enemy increases your damage by 1% for 6 seconds. So I'll probably do Exploit next and then crowd control at the very end. Mainly because bosses in Diablo never actually take any crowd control effects until they're stunned. So any sort of crowd control effects that you have on your weapons don't CC them. They just apply to the stun meter, and then they stun, and then they fall, and then it's like every CC in the entire game is on them. That's why their health bar takes a huge chunk when they stun down, right? But when you're doing damage to a vulnerable enemy, that counts for a boss. So that's why I'm probably going to do exploit next. And that's why vulnerability is always a good thing to have in this game, because of the way that it stacks, because there is an X here. So it stacks multiplicatively, and it works on bosses as well, whereas CC doesn't. CC is going to work on non-bosses. But anyway, yeah, that's what we're looking with the tree. Maybe I'll do a little update on the tree when it's fully finished. So let's get to more bread and butter. First of all, this is my character. Beautiful. We love her. This is still a work in progress with the armor, but I have been busting my ass in tier 4 for the last handful of hours. We've been doing nightmare hunts, tier 4, hell tides, all sorts of stuff. I think, and the big question that I get is, what's the best way to level up? What's the best way to get gear? I think hell tides are by far the best way to just get legendaries and to pull aspects off of them. But I think farming either nightmares a couple levels above you, or farming like one of the Champion's Demise dungeons. But there's actually another one that I think is really good for solo play that was showed to me by someone in chat. Right here, Ruins of Iridu. You can go in here and you can farm that for XP just west of Vires. Champions is up here. Champion's Demise, which is east of Jurendai, above this little circle. We were farming Champion's Demise and that for XP. We were farming the Hell Tides for gear. And yeah, and this is what we come up with. So for helmet, I'm going to go over each piece, what I think is most important to have, and what I think would make my build perfect, because I'm not perfect. I'm still farming gear. All right, helmet. We have willpower, lucky hit chance while you have a barrier, maximum mana, and cooldown reduction. So anything at all that can roll with lucky hit chance while you have a barrier or lucky hit chance must roll with it. So I'm going to read that off real quick. Helmet, gloves, amulet, ring, and your offhand or your focus. All of those can roll with either lucky hit chance or lucky hit chance with a barrier, or both. Okay. So helmet can roll with lucky hit chance. Now, what would make this perfect is what you want on here guaranteed is lucky hit chance with a barrier and cooldown reduction. Those are the must have. If you don't have either one of those, keep looking. What would make this perfect is if I could get rid of that willpower and I could replace it with maybe crowd control duration, or maybe barrier gen, but barrier gen isn't too important. But honestly, this helmet isn't too bad. The willpower is not a bad stat. It's pretty decent. For the chest, I think this is perfect. I think this chest is perfect. I made some notes on what chest I wanted, and I'm looking at my notes right now, and this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted my chest to be like a defensive, right? So this chest has damage reduction from enemies that are burning, total armor, and damage. And you want that flat damage number because of the way that it stacks. And then the rest of the pieces are just giving me a lot of protection. So what I didn't show was the enchantments. So enchantments, you have Ice Shard enchantment. I think early game, Firebolt enchantment is huge, and putting 1 point into Fireball is going to be massive for ad clear. This makes enemies explode. Firebolt, I think, is probably the best enchantment for Sorc in the game, and you should just run this all the time throughout your entire thing. This makes every single one of your skills apply burn to your enemies. So no matter what you use, you're burning them. And this becomes really strong once you start speccing into Ice Shards. So this eventually replaces Fireball. But this right here is how everything is burning. That's where the damage reduction from enemies that are burning comes from. I'll go over the aspects at the end. Next, gloves. The gloves need a lot of work. These are far from perfect, but what's on these that's important is the ranks of Ice Shards and lucky hit chance, and you do want both of those. Now, what would be the perfect roll gloves, Glad? The perfect roll gloves would be lucky hit chance to gain resource, aka mana. Anytime I say resource, that just means mana, plus the Ice Shards and lucky hit chance. So I'm still going to be grinding for those gloves that have lucky hit chance, resource, and crit chance. I'm sorry, crit chance. Because why not? Crit chance just sounds like a good thing to have. It'll help with some of the stats in our skill tree. Pants. So if you don't have these pants, which a lot of you probably don't, for pants, according to my notes, I would just want something with like damage resistance from close enemies, armor, maximum life. Your pants are going to be very similar to your chest. You're going to use them to give you a lot of protection, but these pants are absolutely fucking ridiculous, and it's the best unique that I have found in this game by far, and I cannot believe that something like this even exists. And when I show gameplay, you'll see what I mean. So what these pants do sorry, I've been up for a while. For people in the video, we're 23 hours deep in a stream. So what these pants do, I'll read it off first. Effects that heal you 100% beyond 100% life grant you a barrier. Once again, barrier. Whole build's about barrier. Grant you a barrier of up to 48%. This is a shitty roll. It can actually go up to 80% of your maximum life that lasts for 8 seconds. So anytime I'm popping a potion while at full health or slightly less, or getting life on hit, which is one of the perks in here, it's another lucky hit, or getting life on kill, I'm getting this overshield and this barrier that stays there, and every single time I'm shooting an enemy or getting a kill or anything, I'm just constantly getting this barrier all the time, and you will see how ridiculous this is. If you ever get temerity, just put it on immediately, and I'm never taking this off. There's no shot. Boots. So these boots are actually pretty good. The only thing I would change is I would get rid of the willpower, and I would put on either mana cost reduction or ice armor, plus rank to ice armor. But ideally what you're looking for in boots is mana cost reduction. I'm sorry, I had mana cost reduction. I would put on ice armor. So what you're looking for in boots is mana cost reduction and ranks to teleport, frost nova, and ice armor, all which can roll on boots, but these are pretty solid anyway. As far as the amulet, this is probably the hardest piece to get because there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do. So mine is not good. Do not look at this as an example, but I will tell you what is a good example. What is good on here is the plus rank to defensive, the cooldown reduction, and the mana cost reduction. But what you want on an amulet is you want lucky hit chance while you have a barrier. You want frost skill damage plus to any of your ranks like defensive, and you could even get just like a plus raw to damage stat. Anything like that will work. My top perk, unfortunately, is just I don't really like it. You know, it might be good for like ad clearing, but I would much rather have lucky hit with a barrier. Rings. My preferred ring is lucky hit chance. Oh no. I just got disconnected. Wait, for the rings, what I want in the rings is I keep it pretty simple. I want crit chance, lucky hit chance, and then 2 damage perks, or lucky hit chance and 3 damage perks. It doesn't really matter. There's a lot of different ways that you can go. The rings are actually a lot easier to get than the amulet. You pretty much just need to roll. Like there's so many different damage perks you can get on the rings. You can get, you know, vulnerability. I would say the best ones are probably vulnerability, burn, and raw damage. I would say the second best ones are things like damage to frozen enemies, damage to chilled enemies, damage to close enemies, things like that. But any of those are fantastic. On this one, I have damage to close, lucky hit chance, vulnerable, and critical strike chance. On this one, I have crit chance, lucky hit chance, vulnerable, and burning. So these are both actually really good for my build. The only thing that would really make this better is if maybe the close enemies was burning. So maybe I'll actually go and try to roll that. And then for the weapon, weapon is pretty easy. You first, number one thing that you want, core skill damage, must have it, look for it. And then you just want 3 damage perks, right? And you don't want things like slow or chill. Well, you could do chilled, but you don't want anything that's slow because you're not really slowing anything. You're either freezing or you're not. So this one has close enemies, critical strike damage, vulnerability, and core skill. You could also get damage to crowd controlled. You could get cold damage. You could get burn damage, frozen. There's so many different ways that you can go. But I would look for vulnerability. I would look for core skill damage. Those are the ones that you really want to get. And then over here, this is also something that I'm working on, like just like the amulet, the gloves, because I need an amulet, I need better gloves, and I need a better focus, and then my build will be complete. What's good on here is cooldown reduction, lucky hit chance while you have a barrier, and that's it. What you ideally want, the god roll of this, in my opinion, would be lucky hit chance with a barrier, lucky hit chance, cooldown reduction, and crit chance or mana cost reduction. So I wish that I could get rid of the willpower and life on kill and do crit chance mana cost reduction, or lucky hit chance crit chance, or lucky hit chance mana cost reduction. But that takes care of all the gear and what to look for. And then the last thing here is, let's just take a look at some of the important stats. So really what we're looking for here, I mean, you can take a look at some of your damage to, like, you know, like there's some of your crit chance and your crit damage. You can take a look at your damage to chilled enemies, burning enemies, vulnerable damage, all that stuff. But really, this whole build comes down to all the way down at the bottom right here. This is what you're aiming for, and this is all that you care about, and this is all that matters, is how fucking high can I bump lucky hit chance and lucky hit chance with a barrier. So what this means is that when I have a barrier up 84.5, let's just say 85% of all of my shots that are connecting with enemies are going to proc every single lucky hit in the entire build, so to speak, right? Some of that math may be a little bit off because of the way that things work, like multiplicatively and additive, but for the most part, you can kind of think of it like that to keep it simple, right? So with these numbers so unbelievably high, let's go over one more time all that is happening when this happens, right? All that's happening when this happens is, let me see if there's anything. All right, number one, 85% chance that there's a chance to heal like on hit, right? Let's go back into the abilities, skill tree. All right, the next one is lucky hit. 85% chance. Critical strikes have up to a 5% chance to reset the cooldown of one of your defensive skills. Another lucky hit. Any of my frost skills are going to freeze targets. Another lucky hit. That any damage against a vulnerable target is going to generate mana. And another lucky hit. That any of my frost skills are going to make the next frost skill not consume mana and do 40% damage. So you have all of these things, and they all work separately. Because if you go back to your character and you look at the stat here, it says if you have multiple lucky hit effects, which we have many, right? All of the probabilities are rolling independently based off of our lucky hit bonus, and combine when we have a barrier up with the lucky hit chance with barrier. You can see why all of that is, you know, how all this entire build comes together, and it all comes down to this. And I can't stress how much lucky hit chance is important. As far as aspects, I actually like all of these aspects, so I'm going to go over all of them. We have a defensive one. You gain 0.45% increased armor for 4 seconds when you do any form of damage. So this thing is ridiculous. It's just constant armor in the form of a percentage, which is the best. You take 22% less damage from crowd controlled or vulnerable enemies. I actually really like that. More damage reduction. This one is a must have on the build. Your lucky hit chances increase by 13% when you have a barrier. Keep in mind, these aren't rolled perfectly. None of these are perfect. It's just what the aspect actually is, right? But this one is a must. I think this one is a must too. This one you could swap out to something. This one is the unique. We already went over that. This one is also up for grabs, but I like this. When you hit a crowd controlled enemy, there's a X% chance that the crowd control effect spreads to another enemy. So let's say that you freeze something with the ability in your skill tree, this snap freeze, you're now applying that to enemies nearby. So it's actually really good for crowd control. On your weapon, this is a must have. You must put this on. It's in the codex. Go farm it. It's in one of the dungeons. Ice shards pierce 4 times, dealing 20% less damage per subsequent hit. Whatever the fuck, dude. Nobody says that word. So what this is doing, let me explain why this is incredible, right? This is incredible because ice shards have a 40% chance to ricochet to another enemy and they always ricochet on frozen enemies. So, because you're proccing Lucky Hit with these things to freeze an enemy, these things are pretty much, and you're using Frost Nova to freeze, these things are just always ricocheting all over the place. And what happens is when you use this thing, the ice shards are piercing, so they're going through enemies, and ice shards are basically hitting multiple enemies, one shot of ice shards. And what it's going to cause is it's going to cause all these different splits and breaks and like ricochets all over the place, and you're just going to see like stars of ice shards everywhere. It's insane. Definitely run this. This is probably your best crowd control aspect in the whole build. This one, I have you deal 24% increased damage to vulnerable enemies while you have a barrier. So this is not going to be my final. When I get my God Roll aspect, I'm going to put this on. Core or mastery skills cast at or above 100 mana gain 57% increased critical strike chance. And this pairs perfectly with this. Your core skills above 50 mana deal increased damage, because the whole idea is you're keeping your mana meter filled and as high as possible. On the rings, Avalanche. This one is another must-have. You must have this on the build. Grind it out until you get this. This is going to make your build a lot less strong. So this takes this Avalanche passive, which is the thing I explained where your shards don't consume mana and do 40% damage. Every time this procs, it procs for not only your next shot of shards, but your fucking next shot of shards. So you're going to get 2 bursts in a row that don't consume any mana, which is going to allow your mana meter to refill up without consuming any. And they're both going to do 40% damage. So it's absolutely massive. Using a cooldown restores mana. So this is another one from the Codex. It's a low roll, but I think this is huge, because if you do mess up, and you will see times where like if it's bought at like little enemies that are running around and they're kind of hard to hit, not all of your ice shards are hitting, you are going to lose mana. There are going to be times where you run out of mana. It's not perfect, you know, you can mess up, but all you got to do is pop a teleport, you know, pop a Frost Nova, activate your ice armor, boom, you have your full mana bar back and you start back from square one. And then the final thing is I think this one is just amazing. Deal X% increased damage while you have a barrier. Since you always have a barrier, you're just always going to be doing more damage. I think that's it. I think we went over everything. So yeah, hopefully we went over everything. There is some stuff to change. I apologize if I said anything wrong. I am new to these games. I am new to Diablo, but I'm, you know, a sponge and I like to learn. Yes, ricochet. So we're going to end, for video's sake, we're going to end and just show some gameplay of what this looks like. And you will see the unbelievable survivability and the ridiculous DPS. And this is a really good, so far, endgame class. It holds its weight, but it does require you to know what you're doing and to pay attention, because if you do mess up and you kind of screw up the rhythm, it is very easy to die. If you let your barriers fall down, you're going to get smoked. You know what I mean? So you just got to learn how to, this is about supplementing your barrier so that you can do damage. It's giving your character a barrier that in turn supplements your damage. But cool. Enjoy the gameplay. Thank you. All right, Adam, we might have to include, we might have to scrap the fucking footage from the baby level shit and include this footage in instead. Dude, I swear I don't even use mana, so I'm gonna keep pushing. My goal is to get 100% lucky hit. That's been my goal since this build came into theory crafting, Bill. Dude, this is insane. about, man. Crazy. I was crazy once. We started working on it in 2014. Yep. Unfucking believable.